It's really nice of you to come on. I've been waiting and waiting and waiting for you to release the Zips forecast for the 2023 Cardinals, and I thought it was one of the more interesting ones that we've seen so far that you've written about on Fangraphs. What I really thought was fun was that Zips was basically telling you to shut up because you think the Cardinals are going to be good, but Zips loves the Cardinals, it seems like, for the most part. The Zips thinks the Cardinals will be better than you think they're going to be. So what is that like when Zips actually tells you, hold my beer, go sit down? What's that like?
Well, I don't have any kids, but I wonder if it's like when your kids are rebelling against you. You don't understand my music, Dad.
No, exactly.
No, I think the Cardinals are a very good team. I think they're the favorite in the NL Central, but the Zips is telling me that they're the equal of the Braves or the Mets or the Dodgers, and I still kind of feel that they're like an ace away. Like if you could take, I don't know, just one of the mid-rotation starters, take Steven Matz and turn him into Carlos Rodon, then I'd feel better.
Yeah.
And I think that's what they're missing, but I've been wrong before, and I'll be wrong again. Last year, Zips hated the Tigers, and I thought, maybe they'll go for 500 this year, and they did not go towards 500.
And I mean this because we haven't talked for a while, but what you described there in terms of how we should view the Cardinals and how they'll fare as they are right now going into 2023, and your view of them, I mean this, it just matches the overwhelmingly prevailing view here on the ground in St. Louis. Fans, media. I do think there's a lot of holdouts for some reason on their offense, and I think their offense has a chance to be really, really good. It was really good last year. But we know that there's just something about the rotation where there's nothing wrong with it. It's just, like you said, it's missing that elite guy. And just to elaborate on that a little bit, Dan, I like the way you kind of characterize their rotation in some of your comments in the piece. So why don't you kind of encapsulate what you said about their rotation, other than the fact they could use a top guy?
Well, I don't remember the exact wordage I used simply because my internet is down because of a thunderstorm that's going on right now.
Oh no!
Generally speaking, you have a lot of very good number 2 and 3 guys, and that makes a good rotation, a stable rotation over the course of a season. There's no one that you really just frightens you to see in the rotation, and a lot of teams have that, in the 4th or 5th spot. You don't really have that in St. Louis, but you look at like playoff matchups and you say, who's going to match up against so-and-so? It just doesn't feel like – it just feels like something's missing. And I'm a fan of Rodon. I wanted the Orioles to sign Rodon because that would have been a lot of fun to have him at the start of the rotation because I'm from Baltimore. The Cardinals are a very, very solid team. The stat, and I mentioned it in the piece, that always just blows my mind is by WRC+, which – is a park and league neutral estimate of offense. The Cardinals haven't been worse than 20th in baseball since 1978. That was the year I was born. This is a well-built team.
That's a great stat. I was unaware of that, my friend. I was unaware of that. Our friend Dan Szymborski from Fangraphs is with us discussing his Cardinals unveil in the SIPS projections or the Zips forecast, whatever you want to call it. I wanted to ask you a couple things about that, more specific things about that. Jordan Walker's projections for 2023 are ordinary at best, but you had a message in there about that. Zips likes him going forward, and maybe not 2023 lighting it up, but soon to come.
Yeah, I mean, we're still talking about a guy who's maxed out at Double-A, and there's kind of a word of caution when I talk about minor league prospects this year on the hitting side, is that I don't think people realize just how explosive the increase in minor league offense has been in the last few years. It's kind of been the mirror effect of what's happened in the majors where offense has disappeared. You've had several leagues with ERAs around 5 in the minors this year, including leagues that haven't been that way for a generation. I mean, the Texas League has been in that range. And for most of the 2010s, they had ERAs across the league in the 3.7, 3.8 range. So offense is huge. So you do want to kind of discount the hitting stats of minor leaguers more than you would 2 or 3 years ago. And conversely, you want to be a little more forgiving of pitchers who struggle in the upper minors than you were 2 or 3 years ago. So that kind of shift between minor and major offense is just kind of reversed. So it does you have to take that into consideration when looking at prospects. I mean, Walker's a great prospect, but you don't necessarily think it's going to be 2023 where he breaks out in the majors.
Dan Szymborski with us from Fangraphs. We're talking about his ZiPS system forecast of the 2023 Cardinals. And I have to say, it's going down the list of all their hitters and the guys that we figure, obviously going to get a lot of at-bats. And based on what ZiPS is offering, the Cardinals look like a team that, can be really outstanding offensively. And that doesn't mean all these guys will come through. It just doesn't work that way. But if ZiPS is in the ballpark, so to speak, this could be a pretty special lineup. I mean, just give us your thoughts on that.
Well, I mean, it's hard to complain about an offense where you have 2 MVP candidates from 2023, one who won the MVP, returning, 2022. And you look across the rest of the field, there's no one you really hate to see in the lineup. It's just very, very solid and safe around those 2 MVP candidates. It's not going to be, a crazy Dodger offense, but it's going to be very good.
And, 2 of the guys that intrigue me, just in general, but also they, let's just say they're endorsed by ZiPS. It's 2 guys where we're trying to figure out, okay, how much are they going to fit, and will they get a chance to play a lot? And we still don't have an answer to that. But the ZiPS forecast for Juan Yepez and Alec Burleson, really, really good, especially Burleson. Cardinals fans don't know that much about him. And, he had 48 at-bats at the end of last year, and he didn't make an impression, but nobody should care about that. But and you look at some of the comps for Burleson and even some of the comps for Yepez, and you're like, for their age, to have those kind of comps and also just to get a forecast that's this promising, it makes me think even more that these guys can be have more meaningful roles, let's say.
Yeah, I mean, Burleson, at least at a minimum, looks like a good role player. Obviously, you shouldn't get too excited about individual comps because players are comped to like large groups of similar types of players. Yepez, his power upside is still unknown at this point, and it's tantalizing. And power is a little harder to get in baseball than it was a few years ago. And you look at kind of their 80th percentile projections, and the Cardinals have a lot of guys with just really big upsides. Could Yepez be the guy who hits 35 home runs? We don't know that, but it's a legitimate possibility. And you add that to a team that's pretty much average to above average everywhere, and that's just a really nice thing. It's, as I said, I don't know how many ways I can say solid, but this is just a well-built organization, and most teams should be jealous of how they're built.
And I thought, one of the real pivotal guys for this lineup in 2023 will be Nolan Gorman. I didn't dislike his rookie season. He just kind of went off the cliff late, but he did a lot of good things along the way. And the ZiPS numbers on him are pretty encouraging if you're looking for that, whether to be encouraged or to be pessimistic. Really, really healthy slugging percentage, 29 home runs. I mean, do you like Gorman? I don't know what you thought of him, going into 2022, but was there anything about his performance in 2022 that changed your view of him?
I think, as you say, he is still kind of an unknown quantity in a way, simply because, unlike the rest of the team, because it's a very good defensive team, Gorman doesn't really have a natural position.
Right.
And obviously, if he's going to be a DH long term, that kind of limits his upside because there's only so much upside you can have as a DH. I think that the team's still figuring out where he can play defense Because, I mean, if he could play second well, I don't think that's likely, but that would really just, make his value shoot through the roof if he could at least just be, Dan Ugla or Hanley Ramirez at second instead of short. I still don't know where he will play long term, and that's kind of the big question about him. I think the Cardinals will use him in kind of with a lot of flexibility to see what works for him. And given that the team, relies on a good defense, I don't think they're going to push him too aggressively to play a position that he can't handle. But I think he's still one of the players that the jury is still out on.
Dan, I want to ask you this final thing, and thanks for your time. When we talk about the Zips forecast, I know that when I many years ago started looking at that every midwinter, early spring, whatever, and as a newbie to the process, I would be confused by, for example, the number of plate appearances that are projected. And I want to give you a chance to explain that because I know that's a common thing. Because I was looking today and I'm like, well, wait a minute. Paul DeYoung's not going to get 500 plate appearances. But so the reason I bring this up is because maybe you have some listeners or some readers of what I wrote today, and they're going to head over to Fangraphs. I provided the link and all that. And they're going to read that, and they're going to say, well, wait a minute, hold on. Alec Burleson's not going to get 500 plate appearances or whatever it is. So explain how people should decipher that, even if they know, a guy's probably not going to play that much. So, why does Zips show a guy with 500 plate appearances?
Well, when I'm not simulating a season, Zips tries to be as agnostic as possible with team decisions as possible. Because I think a more interesting use of a projection system is based on the data, how good is a player, not which player will the team choose to play. That doesn't seem to be a very good use of a computer. That I feel that I can evaluate what the Cardinals are thinking better than an algorithm can. I'm more interested in how a double-A hitter would hit in the majors if he was used in the majors more than whether he would be in the majors or not, because a lot of these guys just say, no, they're not even going to get any at-bats in the majors. But if you project a minor leaguer to have 0 plate appearances and a 0 batting average, 0 on-base percentage, 0 slugging percentage, that's not really useful information for everyone.
No, it's not.
I mean, it's like, oh, he won't play. Like, oh, good. So is he good? Should he play? What does he look like in the future? So seeing where players are now, in Major League performance, translations, equivalent performance, that is useful information. I think people get use out of that. So Zips will give everyone playing time based on their history professionally, their position, their age, their specific injury history, and whether the players get to the majors or are used in the majors or even employed. That's kind of a different task than the computer is set out to do.
No, I understand. And I know exactly what's in play here with that, and they're looking at him as if, okay, well, if he did play regularly, I mean, this is what Zips thinks he can do. So it's really good stuff. One more, I'm sorry, man. You haven't had all 30 teams yet go through the Zips wash, but is there the teams you've done so far? Are there a couple? 3 surprises for you, what Zips came up with, whether Zips thinks a team's better than you do or maybe worse than you do?
Well, definitely Zips, I guess possibly 1, 2, and 3 of the surprises is that Zips really likes the Arizona Diamondbacks. I was talking a little bit before about how we should pay attention to pitcher stats in the upper minors and take into consideration that offense was through the roof. And the Diamondbacks had a lot of pitchers in AAA who did survive the Pacific Coast League, which is hard to do right now. You could say that it's almost very good training ground for the majors considering the disparity in offense. So Zips actually thinks that the Diamondbacks could put together a pretty solid rotation very quickly.
Oh, yeah.
And generally the projection runs I've done, obviously very preliminary, they have the Diamondbacks at 82, 83, 84 wins. And that's kind of where a team becomes interesting, because every win you add at that point just dramatically increases your odds of making the playoffs. A 70-win team becoming a 72-win team, that doesn't move the needle. An 84-win team becoming an 86-win team, all of a sudden you're in business, especially with an extra playoff spot in each league than a few years ago. So the Diamondbacks are a surprise. I was also happily surprised that Zip sees the Orioles retaining so many of their gains from 2022. Because generally speaking, when a team just explodes like that, they always kind of fall back to earth a little bit. But Zips actually adds a couple wins to the Orioles from last year. Essentially, they're such a young team with so much upside that any kind of regression toward the mean is kind of canceled out by the possible improvements, getting a full year of Gunnar Henderson in the majors, possibly getting Grayson Rodriguez, DL Hall in the majors. So I'm more excited about the Orioles than I've really been since the 90s.
I was, as a long ago Orioles fan, as you were, and we both grew up in the same area, when I had the chance to kind of, because I have to pay close attention to the Cardinals for obvious reasons, and I want to, but when the Orioles kicked in last summer, it was really exciting. It was just really fun to watch the games because it had been so long, and boy, to see some of the young talent and to come to the realization that, hey, that young talent that they're assembling, that's really good. That's legit stuff. And I was actually disappointed they didn't maybe try to add to their team last year, but more specifically, and I wanted to get your opinion on it. Maybe not so much at the trade deadline, but I thought their offseason was disappointing. That they could have done more without dumping over the old apple cart in terms of their plan and bringing prospects along and all that. I wish they would have done a little bit because I think the fans are hungry for it.
Yeah, I was fine with them not going all in at the deadline because I thought it was still a long shot. But I did really hope that this was the off season. As I said earlier, Carlos Rodon would have been a lot of fun. I joked that they could have added Schertz, they had DeGrom, Verlander, and Rodon to the roster and still have a payroll number of around $130 million, which is below average. Obviously, that was an unlikely scenario, but I really was hoping that they would add more because, as I said, they're kind of getting into that magic range where every win you add has huge playoff implications. I'm hoping that it's better next year. I could dream of Ohtani. That would be a great deal of fun. But this team, if it's good, the Orioles did have some good teams in the 2010s, but they didn't really feel like classic Oriole teams, which were built from within, Cal Ripken, Eddie Murray, all those guys. But this team could be that team. So that's why I'm more excited for this team than really since, I guess, after 1989, after the Why Not season.
Yeah, that's good stuff, Dan. I appreciate it, man. I know I can get in touch with you. You start emailing you next season just to get your thoughts on the Orioles, just fan to fan. So I kind of, I follow them from a distance, and there's a lot more to watch now. So, but listen, thanks. I know you're working really hard, and I was very kind of you to come on and give us such a generous amount of time. The Zips forecast is an annual event for me. It's like an early birthday present. So thanks for it was really fun to see that when I clicked on Fangraphs this morning. Well done as always. Yep.
Well, thanks for having me on, Bernie. I mean, you, as I always say, you were one of the first writers in the mainstream who knew about and discovered my work and amplified it. So you can have me on anytime. We can go get pit beef anytime. That we're in the same town, hopefully in Baltimore.
Oh yeah,
just bring me.
I can't even describe, but when I get asked by my dear friends in St. Louis, and this is my second hometown. I have two hometowns. They hear about this pit beef, and I kind of flunk it. I'm like, I can't even really know how to describe it to you. I've given them websites of some of the places so they could look at photos and get a better idea, but. Now you've made me hungry. I need a pit beef sandwich. So thanks for that.
Thanks,
We'll talk soon. Thank you.
Absolutely.
That's our friend Dan Szymborski. Follow him on Twitter, and I will spell the name for you. It's at D, and then his last name is Szymborski, at D. Szymborski. And I thought I had a difficult Polish name, right? He's something else. Zips ain't all that hot on Jack Flaherty either, but they have him above average. But they have like the 2018 version of Jack Flaherty. That would be the closest comp. Zips also sees Miles Michaelis declining, still above average, but barely. I think Zips got pretty good feelings about Steven Matz. Jordan Montgomery, pretty good. There's a lot of pretty good, And if you look at, for example, the projections, like Adam Wainwright, he's exactly average, right? And there's a couple other guys like that too. So Dan Szymborski's got a great handle. For someone on the outside, he's got a great handle on the Cardinals. The Cardinals have a much better offense than what, oddly enough, even some of the fans realize. But that's okay, because I know a lot of fans do realize the offense is good, with a real chance to get better this year. But, Dan perfectly summed up the state of their rotation. It's not that it's bad. It's not that, oh, my goodness, it's just, what are they doing? It's horrible. But it's just, first of all, there's been a history of breakdowns. And for 2 years in a row, they've had to struggle and scamper and scramble to try to add pitching because they never have enough of it. They always overestimate their depth. And the other thing, there's not that horse at the top. There just isn't. Like he said, he thinks they have a lot of number 2s and 3s, and I would even disagree with Dan in saying I think they have plenty of 3s, maybe a 2, maybe a couple of 2s, so maybe he's right. But even if you just go by his own forecast system, it's not all that impressive. It just isn't. So it would be a shame for them to have a really good offensive year from all these guys, because if you just go to Fangraphs.com and look it up. You can read it yourself. When you see all the forecasts that have above averages performance, the sheer volume, the number of those guys, I mean, it's pretty impressive. It doesn't mean that it's a lock to come through, but Zips usually gets you in the ballpark, and every now and then there's always going to be teams that outperform the anticipated metrics, or they are worse than the forecasted the forecast of the metrics. That's the point. If we all knew that these things were going to come true 100% of the time, we'd all be tremendously wealthy and either living on an island or whatever you would like to do with your money. So there's no exact science here, but Zips usually get you in the neighborhood, and just gives you a general idea.